First, there was the Tesla Roadster, the two-seat sports car that was built to prove to the world that electric cars could be fast, powerful, and not boring. Then there was the Tesla Model S, Tesla's first mass-produced electric car. It was powerful, it was sexy, they had plenty of technology, and it became the world's fastest production vehicle. Then there was the Tesla Model X, the kind of sexy SUV for people who'd got plenty of money and wanted all the bells, whistles, and gadgets you could throw at it. And then there's the Tesla Model 3. This is the car that everyone says will change the world. But is it all that in a packet of crisps? Let's find out. If you've driven the Model S or the Model X, you'll find that driving the Model 3 is a very familiar experience. This feels like a smaller version of the Model S. It feels a little more accommodating in some ways than the S because it doesn't feel so large. And the first thing that really strikes you when you're driving is the fact that there's no dashboard in front of you and you've got this glorious view of the road ahead. So where do you get all your information from? Well, you have this massive touchscreen display in the center of the vehicle. On the top left-hand corner of that is the speed. But it's very, very clear, very easy to see. It just takes a second to glance down. And of course, the Model 3 has been designed with the idea of having Autopilot engaged most of the time in the future. And that means when Tesla gets to a point that it's confident enough in its Autopilot technology, you won't have to look at the speed because the car will be taking care of all of that for you. Early Model 3s, some people complained about suspension issues, but this particular Model 3, which was made earlier this year, the suspension is just peachy. It's just lovely and fine. And I wouldn't have any issues driving over that, maybe even a little faster. We went over them at about 30 miles an hour, so we didn't really even have to slow down for them. Because it's a smaller car, the Model 3 does feel a lot more nimble on these nice twisty roads. And going around corners is not a problem. The power steering is speed sensitive, so it adjusts its assistance based on how hard you turn the steering wheel and how fast you're going. And it's following the lines of the road very nicely indeed. I can't detect any oversteer or understeer. It all feels very solid and predictable, which is very nice. Now, because everything in the Model 3 is electronic, you can adjust the steering response and the steering feel. Right now, it's set in sport mode, which means you've got this nice heavy feel. You get a little bit more feedback than you would in the standard mode of operating. On this lovely downhill section, which I know very, very well, I just have to ease off the throttle and I'm not having to touch the brake pedal at all, and I'm just being able to wind the car through these curves in a really nice smooth way. A little bit of a twitch there as I transitioned from the right side to the left, but nothing really problematic at all. Visibility from the front of the Model 3, as I've already said, is really good. You can see very, very clearly the road ahead, and because there's no gauges in front of you, it feels like you can see right in front of the car. Obviously, the Model 3 has a shorter nose than the Model S or the Model X, so it does have that sort of feeling that you can look and see exactly where you're going. The owner of this car actually compares it a little bit to driving the Honda Fit, and I've got to agree, it's got that same kind of front end feel. Very, very easy to see. But the A-pillar does have a little bit of a blind spot. These A-pillars are pretty large. Obviously, they've got the airbags and everything in there. You do have a little bit of a blind spot in town and on little roads like this when you're going around corners. If you've got a left-hander coming up, you really have to look through, and the pillar is just where I want to be looking. I'm just about to head onto the local highway, freeway. It's 26 back into Portland, and I'm going to try Autopilot for the first time. Now I've been in cars, I've been in the Tesla when Autopilot's engaged. I've never used Autopilot before because the Teslas I've driven have never had it. And so in a second, once I've actually got on the freeway, I will enable it and we'll see what it's like. So I have to do a double tap down, and it's now asking me to set the cruise control. Here we go. The steering wheel's turned blue, which tells me that Autopilot is engaged. So now the car is doing most of the work. Let's talk about options and pricing. Model 3 starts at $35,000, but for that, you will get an entry-level Model 3 with a 220-mile battery pack. It will have black exterior paint. If you want a different colour, it's going to cost you extra. If you want Autopilot, it's going to cost you extra. And that's current Autopilot. If you want, full autonomous driving, that's going to cost you even more. If you want the premium package, the sound upgrade, the list goes on. I've spoken to lots of people who have driven Model 3, and they all say the same thing, and I kind of agree with them. If you want a Model 3, you're not going to want that entry-level 220-mile, $35,000 Model 3. You might be okay with the battery pack as it stands, but you are going to want to have some of those extra features. You are going to want to have Autopilot. You are going to want to have the premium sound package. You are going to want to have all these other features. If you want all the bells and whistles, it's going to cost you a lot. Now, this car has every option box ticked apart from a wheel upgrade, and it cost $59,000. You'll notice I haven't really talked about performance specs or specs of this car. That's partly because Tesla doesn't actually disclose official power output for the motor. It doesn't officially discuss capacity of the battery pack. It doesn't officially discuss a lot of these other little minutiae that a lot of car companies are so obsessed with. The battery pack in this model is about 75 kilowatt hours. And you're looking at probably about 250 kilowatts. I think that's a very conservative estimate for the motor power. In terms of acceleration, it's 5.1 seconds 0 to 60 for this model. It's the higher end model, the long range Model 3. I've already mentioned range. It's 220 miles for the short range, the standard battery pack for Model 3. And if you go with the long range battery pack option, you're looking at about 310 miles per charge. Without a center console in front of you, without a dashboard or a display in front of you telling you how fast you're going, Tesla has to put all the information on this big old touchscreen display in the center of the car. You've got the left-hand side of that display is devoted to the actual car, so things like whether the trunk is open, whether the charge door is open. Those things are all on the left-hand side of the dash. And on the right, you've got the standard Tesla settable display. At the moment, it's set for navigation. It's a very, very good representation of Google Maps. And it's very clear, very simple to use. It has auto zooming, so if you slow down, it zooms in. If you're on the freeway, it kind of zooms out. And if you've ever sat behind the wheel of a Model S or a Model X, this touchscreen display is very familiar. The only thing that's missing, however, is CarPlay and Android Auto. Feels like Tesla's dropped the ball on that one. So let's get going. Foot on the brake, you hold the selector down momentarily into D, and then you're good to go. I've made quite a few comparisons to the Chevrolet Bolt EV. And that's not because I feel that these two cars will cross-shop, they don't. but because it's the car that I drive on a daily basis. And the Bolt EV power delivery and the Model 3 power delivery are so different. The Bolt EV sometimes feels a little bit like an uncouth muscle car. You can have all the power now, and you'll break traction and your wheels will spin and everyone will look at you. Model 3 gets you there. It gets you there more quickly, but it delivers the power in a much more controlled way. That initial movement, the initial from standstill acceleration, feels a lot smoother than it would be in the Bolt EV. But as soon as you've got moving, it then pushes you. It's like someone pushing you in the back. So you just put your foot in and the car dials in that power in a very smooth, controlled way. And it gives you so much confidence that you're not going to lose traction, that you're not going to have a situation where the car is being uncontrollable or perhaps more difficult to control than you'd like. So let's talk about the elephant in the room here. And the elephant is quality control for Model 3. Early Model 3s, I think it's fair to say, had quality control issues, just like early Model S's and early Model X's. They all had that same kind of issues, things like panel gap problems, things like rattles and bangs and weird noises that shouldn't be there. Issues with the way that the car was put together, little niggles, things that most automakers would not let out of the factory. And there's been, huge numbers of reports from mainstream outlets saying things like, Tesla is letting cars out of the factory that aren't 100% and it's choosing to let itself fix them afterwards. And I've seen photos of massive panel gaps. I've seen people show some of the issues that they had with Model 3, just like I did for Model S and Model X. But there's nothing that I've noticed, and I've spent 2 days with this car, that makes me go, meh, this isn't well made. Let's talk charging. We haven't talked about charging yet. Now, just like the Model S and the Model X, the Model 3 comes with supercharging enabled as standard. And that means that you can turn up at any Tesla supercharger station, plug your car in, and get lots of nice electricity, lots of electrons flowing into the battery pack. So that makes things very nice on long distance trips. You can charge very quickly, far more quickly than you can with current CHAdeMO or CCS quick charge technology. So certainly reduce your travel times versus what you'd be doing in, say, the Chevrolet Bolt EV or the Nissan Leaf, especially with rapid gauge. But unlike Model S and Model X, you have to pay to use the supercharger. You don't get free supercharging for life. You have to pay every time you plug in. Tesla will take care of the billing and you'll just be invoiced for your charging. And it's very transparent. You don't have to carry an RFID card or anything. The car is automatically recognised by the charging station. And so it's pretty seamless from the driver's point of view. If you don't want to use a supercharger, or you don't need to use a supercharger, of course you can charge at home from a standard domestic charging station. If you use a off-the-shelf 220 volt AC charging station, like you would use with any other EV, you will of course need an adapter to go from J1772 to the Tesla connector. And charging overnight is about 12 hours from empty to full for the larger battery pack. However, just like the Model S and the Model X, you can buy a higher current domestic charging station for your Tesla, which has a Tesla connector on the end, so it's all, nicely packaged. And that charging station will deliver far more charge power to your Model 3, and it will fill the battery pack far more quickly. So that's it. That's the Tesla Model 3. It's been a fantastically fun car to drive. And just like the Model S and the Model X, it's an excellent example of what an electric car could and should be in the real world. But is the Tesla Model 3 a revolutionary car? Well, honestly, no. Granted, having access to the supercharger network is a major plus feature if you need to do long distance trips on a regular basis. Are there any other reasons? Well, it's smaller than the Model S, and that is going to be a bonus if you live in a congested major city or you live in other countries like the UK, where the roads are smaller and trying to park a full-size Model S is a problem. So, not so much revolutionary there, just more practical in terms of choice. What about the price then? That $35,000 headline price for a highway-capable car that can recharge quickly and has all of these other features. Well, if the Tesla Model 3 was available for $35,000 in this configuration, yes, totally, it would be completely revolutionary and it would be really impressive. But the reality is that this is not the car that you buy if you spend $35,000 on a Tesla Model 3. The car you buy for $35,000 is far less than what this car is. It has far less capability in terms of autopilot, it doesn't go as far, it's not quite as quick. And I kind of have to admit that if you're going to buy a Model 3, this is the car you're going to want to buy. And at nearly $60,000, that's not a particularly revolutionary or impressive price. So, do I like the Model 3? Yes, I loved driving it. It's one of my favorite test drives over the last 10 years. So what am I saying here? Well, the Model 3 is an extremely competent electric car. It will cross-shop against and beat any number of internal combustion engine cars of a similar price point and a similar size. But this is not the car for your everyday person. This is not the Volkswagen Beetle of electric cars or the Model T of electric cars. It's just a lot of fun.